Welcome to the world of science function. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. The air shimmered above the Nevada desert, distorting the scorching afternoon sun as it beat down on the barren landscape. Out of nowhere, a green streak tore through the sky, trailing a cascade of violet sparks. The object, irregular and alien in design, crash-landed with an audible thud, sending plumes of sand into the air. A moment later, the usual silence of the desert returned, but it carried with it an unspoken tension, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Miles away in an underground military facility disguised as a rundown warehouse, Captain Sarah Hayes stared at the blinking red light on the control panel. It had been years since the Celestial Network Defense Grid, Earth's last line of protection against extraterrestrial threats, had registered anything unusual. This wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. "Is this a drill?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp with controlled urgency. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Patel, was already scrolling through the incoming data on his tablet. "Negative, ma'am. This is real. Whatever just landed, it bypassed our early warning systems entirely," he replied, his tone equal parts awe and apprehension. "Telemetry suggests it's not one of ours." Sarah's mind raced as she stared at the satellite feed on the main monitor. The object, a dark, jagged vessel, appeared to be intact, despite its rough landing. The implications were clear: not only had something breached Earth's secret defense system, but it had done so with alarming precision. "Get me the president," Sarah commanded. "And scramble a recon team to the crash site. I want eyes on that thing 5 minutes ago." As the command center erupted into action, Sarah took a steadying breath. She had spent her entire career preparing for a scenario like this, yet she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was already off script. Meanwhile, in the small, unassuming town of Dunswood, 30 miles from the crash site, high school science teacher and part-time conspiracy theorist Jack Lewis was obsessively scanning radio frequencies in his cluttered basement. His equipment, cobbled together from thrift store finds and military surplus auctions, suddenly burst to life with an ear-splitting burst of static. Jack leaned forward, his heart pounding, as a series of strange, rhythmic pulses emerged from the noise. "What the?" he muttered, scribbling the sequence into a notebook. The pattern wasn't random, it was structured, deliberate. It reminded him of the kind of encrypted signals he'd read about in declassified Cold War documents. But this wasn't from Earth, he was certain of it. Before he could analyze the signal further, a deafening roar shook the basement. Jack bolted upstairs and flung open his front door just in time to see 2 unmarked black helicopters streaking overhead, heading west. "Oh, this is big," Jack whispered, a grin spreading across his face. "Really big." Back at the crash site, the recon team, led by Sergeant Elena Ruiz, approached the alien vessel with extreme caution. Clad in hazmat suits and armed with advanced weaponry, they formed a perimeter around the ship. The craft was like nothing they'd ever seen, a chaotic blend of sharp edges and organic curves, pulsating faintly with an otherworldly blue glow. "No visible entry points," Elena reported into her comms. "The surface is shifting, almost like it's alive." Before anyone could respond, a section of the ship rippled and dissolved, revealing an opening. The team instinctively raised their weapons, but nothing emerged. The silence was unnerving. "Orders, Captain." Elena's voice crackled over the comms. In the command center, Sarah hesitated. The protocol was clear, secure and contain. But this was a first contact scenario, and every instinct told her caution was paramount. "Hold your position," she instructed. "Do not engage unless directly threatened. We need to understand what we're dealing with." Elena acknowledged the order, but her unease was palpable. She motioned for her team to maintain their positions as she slowly approached the opening. The air inside the vessel was thick and humid, carrying an electric charge that made the hairs on her neck stand on end. She peered inside, her flashlight cutting through the dim, pulsating interior. What she saw made her freeze. "Captain," Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "You need to see this." The command center's feed from Elena's helmet cam showed a chamber filled with strange, semi-transparent pods. Inside each pod was a humanoid figure, their features eerily similar to humans but unmistakably alien. They were suspended in a viscous, glowing liquid, their eyes closed as if in deep slumber. "My God," Sarah murmured. "They're alive." Before she could process the revelation, alarms blared throughout the facility. Marcus, still glued to his tablet, shouted above the noise. "We've got incoming. Multiple bogies, high speed, low altitude. Whatever that thing is, it didn't come alone." Panic rippled through the command center. Sarah clenched her fists, her mind racing. If this was an invasion, they were already behind the curve. "Lock down the base," she ordered. "And get me a live feed of those bogies." As the satellite images loaded, Sarah's stomach dropped. The incoming vessels weren't ships, they were biological. Enormous, winged creatures with sleek, metallic exoskeletons that glinted in the sunlight. They moved with terrifying coordination, heading straight for the crash site. "Sergeant Ruiz, you've got company," Sarah warned. "Prepare for hostile engagement." "Understood," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the looming threat. She signaled her team to fall back and establish a defensive position around the vessel. The creatures were closing in fast, their screeches piercing the air. In Dunswood, Jack's makeshift radar system lit up like a Christmas tree. He watched in awe as the screen displayed the incoming swarm. Grabbing his camera and a backpack filled with whatever gadgets he thought might come in handy, he jumped into his beat-up pickup truck. "This is it," he muttered to himself, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "The proof I've been waiting for." As Jack sped towards the crash site, Sarah and her team prepared for what was shaping up to be the most critical moment of their lives. The defense grid had failed, the stakes were higher than ever, and Earth's survival might just depend on their ability to think fast, act decisively, and hope, against all odds, that the visitors weren't here to end humanity. The first creature reached the perimeter and let out a deafening roar. Its talons sliced through the air as Elena fired the first shot. The battle had begun, and there was no turning back. The first blast from the alien creature's screech reverberated through the air, sending shockwaves that knocked the recon team to their knees. Sergeant Elena Ruiz scrambled to her feet, barking orders as the winged beasts began their assault. Plasma rounds from the team's rifles lit up the twilight sky, but the creatures were faster than anticipated, weaving through the onslaught with unsettling agility. One creature swooped low, talons gleaming, and clipped a soldier's shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Hold the line!" Elena shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Her team formed a defensive arc around the alien vessel, their weapons trained on the incoming swarm. It was clear that these creatures weren't just mindless attackers, they moved with coordination, as if responding to an unspoken command. The realization sent a chill down her spine. In the command center, Captain Sarah Hayes gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. The live feed showed the swarm's precision and ferocity. Marcus Patel worked furiously at his station, pulling up data on the creatures. "They're emitting some kind of low-frequency signal," Marcus reported, his voice tight with urgency. It's like they're communicating. But the signal's too complex to decode on the fly." "Can we disrupt it?" Sarah asked, her mind racing. "Maybe," Marcus replied, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "If we can isolate the frequency and blast a counter-signal, it might disorient them." "Do it," Sarah ordered. "We'll buy Elena's team some time." As Marcus worked, Elena's team fought valiantly, but the creature's numbers were overwhelming. Elena aimed at one creature that had landed perilously close to the vessel, its talons digging into the ground as it let out a guttural hiss. Her shot hit true, and the beast crumpled, its metallic exoskeleton sparking as it fell. "Captain, we're running low on ammo," Elena shouted into her comms. "And these things aren't letting up." "Hold tight, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "We're working on a solution." Miles away, Jack Lewis drove like a man possessed, his truck bouncing over uneven terrain. The glow from the alien vessel on the horizon grew brighter with every passing second. His mind raced with possibilities. If he could document this, it would vindicate years of ridicule and disbelief. But as he approached the site, the sound of gunfire and unearthly screeches made him slam on the brakes. "Oh, no," Jack muttered, staring wide-eyed at the scene unfolding ahead. He grabbed his camera and stepped out of the truck, crouching low as he inched closer. From his vantage point, he could see the soldiers holding their ground against the monstrous creatures, and his heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilaration. In the command center, Marcus let out a triumphant shout. "Got it. Counter signal ready." "Broadcast it now," Sarah ordered. "Wide frequency." The facility's communication array hummed to life, emitting a powerful burst of sound waves. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the creatures faltered mid-attack, their movements becoming erratic. One by one, they let out piercing cries and retreated, their massive wings propelling them into the night sky. Elena's team watched in stunned silence as the swarm disappeared over the horizon. The battlefield was eerily quiet, save for the crackling of fires and the groans of wounded soldiers. Elena lowered her weapon, her chest heaving. "What the hell just happened?" she muttered. "We hit them with a counter signal," Sarah's voice crackled over the comms. "But it's temporary. We need to secure that vessel and get out of there before they come back." Elena nodded, rallying her team to move inside the alien craft. The interior was even more surreal up close, with its pulsating walls and strange, bioluminescent patterns. The pods they had seen earlier remained undisturbed, their occupants still suspended in their glowing liquid. "Captain, these pods, they look like stasis chambers," Elena reported. "I think these beings are still alive. Can you extract one?" Sarah asked. Elena hesitated. "Maybe. But we don't know how the chamber works. If we mess with it, we could kill them." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus interjected. Captain. We've got a problem." Sarah turned to him, her stomach sinking. "What now?" "That signal we disrupted. It's back, and it's stronger. I think those creatures were just the first wave. Something bigger is coming." Sarah's mind raced. They were out of time. "Elena, you need to grab whatever intel you can and exfil ASAP. Leave the vessel if you have to." "Understood," Elena replied. She directed her team to begin gathering samples and footage, prioritizing speed over thoroughness. Outside, Jack continued to inch closer to the crash site, his camera recording everything. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Real, honest-to-God aliens. He was so focused on his filming that he didn't notice the faint hum growing louder until it was nearly deafening. Above him, the sky seemed to split open as a massive alien ship emerged from the clouds, its size dwarfing anything Jack had ever seen. Its surface was a shifting mosaic of lights and textures, mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. "Oh, crap," Jack whispered, his excitement giving way to sheer terror. He scrambled back to his truck, fumbling for his keys. But he couldn't tear his eyes away from the colossal ship descending toward the crash site. In the command center, Sarah's voice was calm but firm. "Get me a tactical analysis of that thing. I want to know what we're up against." Marcus worked frantically, but the data coming in made no sense. "Captain, this ship, it's adapting. Our systems can't even get a consistent reading on it." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then we're flying blind." She activated her comms. "Elena, you've got incoming. A big one. Get your team out of there now." Elena looked up as the massive ship loomed overhead, its presence casting an ominous shadow over the desert. She could feel the weight of it, as if the air itself was bowing under its gravity. "Copy that," Elena said, her voice steady despite the growing dread. "Team, fall back. Double time." As the soldiers scrambled to retreat, the alien ship began to emit a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. The pods inside the vessel glowed brighter, their occupants stirring for the first time. "Captain," Elena called out, her voice tinged with urgency. The things inside the pods, they're waking up. Then leave them, Sarah replied. We'll figure out what they want later. Right now, your lives are the priority. But even as Elena's team retreated, the hum grew louder, and the alien ship began to descend, its intentions unclear but undeniably menacing. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and Sarah knew they were running out of moves. The massive alien ship settled into the air above the crash site, casting an ominous shadow over the landscape. Its pulsating surface shimmered with patterns of light that seemed almost hypnotic, as if it were alive and calculating its next move. On the ground, Sergeant Elena Ruiz and her team scrambled to retreat, but the oppressive hum emanating from the ship made every step feel heavier, every breath more labored. The very atmosphere seemed to resist their escape. We've got to move, Elena shouted, urging her team forward. The soldiers, weary and battered, tightened their grips on their weapons as they pushed toward their extraction point. Behind them, the alien vessel's open portal began to glow brighter, illuminating the pods within. The figures inside stirred, their movements unnervingly synchronized. In the command center, Captain Sarah Hayes paced behind Marcus Patel, who was furiously typing away at his console. The tactical feed showed the alien ship's activity in real time, but the data coming in was a tangled mess of unknown variables. It's doing something, Marcus said, his voice laced with urgency. Energy levels are spiking. Whatever's inside those pods, they're waking up, and it looks like the ship is powering up for something big. Sarah's mind raced. Can we hit it with an EMP? Marcus hesitated. Maybe, but there's no guarantee it'll work. And if it does, it might take out our systems too. Sarah clenched her fists. We don't have a choice. Prep the EMP strike. We'll use it as a last resort. At the crash site, the first of the pod occupants began to emerge. The fluid inside the chambers drained away, and the translucent material dissolved, releasing the beings within. They were tall, humanoid but distinctly alien, with elongated limbs and eyes that shimmered like liquid mercury. Their movements were graceful yet mechanical, as if every step and gesture were calculated. Contact! Elena shouted, raising her weapon. The team formed a defensive line, their sights trained on the advancing figures. But the aliens didn't attack. They stood in eerie silence, their heads tilting in unison as if studying the humans. One of the beings stepped forward, raising a slender hand. A low, resonant sound emanated from it, not unlike the hum of the ship. Elena's instincts screamed at her to fire, but she held back, her finger hovering over the trigger. Captain, they're not engaging, she reported. But they're doing something. I think they're trying to communicate. Keep your distance, Sarah ordered. We're not taking any risks. Back in the command center, Marcus's console beeped with new data. Captain, that signal we disrupted earlier? It's coming from the ship again, but now it's directed at the ground. I think it's trying to link with the pods or the beings. Can we jam it again? Sarah asked. Already on it, Marcus replied. He initiated the counter signal, and for a moment, the hum from the ship faltered. The aliens on the ground stiffened, their movements becoming erratic. But then, the ship adapted, its signal shifting to a new frequency that the human systems couldn't intercept. Damn it, Marcus muttered. It's learning. Fast. The situation escalated when the ship's underside began to glow, a concentrated beam of light shooting down toward the crash site. Elena and her team dove for cover as the beam struck the ground, carving a perfect circle around the alien vessel. The earth trembled, and the air filled with the acrid scent of scorched rock. Captain, it's cutting the vessel out of the ground. Elena shouted. They're trying to take it back. Sarah's voice came through steady and commanding. Fall back. Now. We'll hit it with the EMP once you're clear. Roger that, Elena replied, rallying her team. As they retreated, the alien beings made no move to follow, instead standing motionless within the glowing circle. Their silence was almost more unnerving than an attack. From his hiding spot, Jack Lewis watched the scene unfold, his camera still rolling. The massive ship, the glowing beam, the strange humanoid figures, it was the kind of footage that could upend everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. But as the ground began to quake, Jack realized he was far too close to the action. "Time to go," he muttered to himself, clutching his camera as he scrambled back to his truck. He barely managed to start the engine before the ground split open behind him, a deep fissure spreading outward from the alien vessel. In the command center, Marcus gave the signal. "EMP ready on your command, Captain." Sarah took a deep breath. "Fire." The facility's EMP generator roared to life, releasing a powerful electromagnetic pulse that rippled through the atmosphere. For a moment, everything went dark. Monitors flickered, lights dimmed, and even the hum of the alien ship fell silent. When the systems rebooted, the tactical feed showed the alien ship hovering motionless, its lights dimmed. "Direct hit," Marcus confirmed. "The ship's disabled." Relief washed over Sarah, but it was short-lived. On the ground, the alien beings began to move again, their movements more erratic but no less purposeful. One by one, they turned their gaze skyward, their liquid metal eyes locking onto the command center's location as if they could see straight through the distance. Captain," Marcus said nervously. "I think we just pissed them off." The ship's lights flickered back to life, brighter and more intense than before. The ground beneath it began to quake violently, and the fissure widened. A deep, resonant sound filled the air, more powerful and bone-shaking than any before. "They're overriding the EMP," Marcus said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I didn't think that was possible." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Options? None that don't involve a lot of collateral damage," Marcus replied. On the ground, Elena's team reached their extraction point, piling into the waiting transport vehicles. As the convoy sped away, Elena looked back at the glowing ship and the alien figures, a sense of foreboding settling in her gut. "Captain," she said over the comms, "whatever happens next, we're going to need backup. A lot of it." Sarah nodded, though Elena couldn't see her. "Understood. Get back here safely. We're not out of this yet." The alien ship began to rise, its energy output climbing exponentially. In the command center, alarms blared as Marcus scrambled to analyze the readings. "Captain, it's building up to something," he said. "And whatever it is, it's going to be big." Sarah stared at the screen, her mind racing. They had taken their best shot, and it hadn't been enough. Now, with the ship fully operational again and the aliens clearly preparing for their next move, the stakes had never been higher. One thing was certain, humanity's survival would depend on more than just brute force. It would require ingenuity, courage, and a willingness to take risks that no one had ever imagined. The alien ship hovered ominously above the fissured earth, its pulsating lights casting an otherworldly glow over the desert. Inside the command center, Captain Sarah Hayes' mind raced as she tried to process the rapidly escalating situation. The EMP had been their best shot at neutralizing the threat, but the ship had adapted, its power now surging to levels they could barely comprehend. "Captain, energy readings are off the charts," Marcus Patel said, his voice tight with urgency. "Whatever it's building up to, it's going to be catastrophic." Sarah stared at the monitors, weighing her options. Conventional weapons wouldn't work, and their tech was no match for the aliens' ability to adapt. If they were going to survive, they'd need to outthink their adversary. "What about the signal?" Sarah asked suddenly, her eyes narrowing. "The one the ship's been broadcasting. Can we turn it against them?" Marcus blinked, momentarily thrown by the idea. "Maybe," he said, his fingers already flying over his keyboard. "If we can amplify and distort it, we might disrupt their systems, but it's a long shot." "Do it," Sarah said firmly. "And patch me through to Sergeant Ruiz." The comm crackled to life, and Elena's voice came through, steady despite the tension. "Ruiz here. Sergeant, we're going to try something unconventional," Sarah explained. "We're amplifying the alien signal to see if we can destabilize the ship. But we need a ground team to plant a signal booster near their vessel. You're the closest." There was a pause before Elena replied. Understood. We'll get it done. As Marcus worked to manipulate the signal, Elena's team doubled back toward the crash site, their transport kicking up clouds of dust as it sped across the desert. The alien ship loomed larger with each passing moment, its energy field crackling menacingly. Inside the vehicle, Elena reviewed the booster device, its compact design belying the critical role it would play. "All right, listen up," she said, addressing her team. "This is a high-risk op. We plant the booster, we get out. Fast. No heroics." The team nodded, their expressions grim but resolute. They'd faced impossible odds before, but this felt different. The stakes were higher, the enemy unlike anything they'd ever encountered. As they neared the crash site, the alien beings came into view. They were no longer motionless, instead, they moved with an unsettling purpose, their liquid metal eyes fixed on the ship above. The glowing circle carved into the ground now pulsated in sync with the ship's lights, creating an eerie rhythm that seemed to resonate through the air. Elena signaled for the vehicle to stop, and the team disembarked, moving cautiously toward the designated drop point. The booster had to be placed within the circle for the plan to work, but that meant venturing dangerously close to the aliens. Elena's heart pounded as she led the way, her rifle at the ready. "Eyes on the prize," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Back in the command center, Marcus finished configuring the signal. "Booster is ready to deploy," he announced. "As soon as it's in place, we'll amplify the distortion." Sarah nodded. "Let's hope this works." At the crash site, Elena reached the edge of the glowing circle. The air here felt heavier, charged with energy. She dropped to one knee and began setting up the booster, her movements precise despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Behind her, the team kept a watchful eye on the aliens, who remained eerily still but exuded a palpable sense of awareness. "Booster is in place," Elena reported. "Activating now." The device hummed to life, its small antenna extending upward as it began transmitting the distorted signal. The effect was immediate. The aliens staggered, their synchronized movements breaking apart as they clutched their heads in unison. Above them, the ship's lights flickered wildly, its energy field fluctuating. "It's working," Marcus said, his voice tinged with astonishment. "The signal's disrupting their neural link." "Good," Sarah replied. "Elena, get your team out of there now." "Copy that," Elena said, already motioning for her team to retreat. But as they moved to pull back, the alien ship let out a deafening roar, a sound so deep and resonant it seemed to shake the very fabric of reality. The ground quaked violently, and a massive beam of light shot down from the ship, obliterating the booster in a blinding explosion. Elena's team was thrown to the ground, their ears ringing from the blast. Dazed but alive, Elena scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. The ship was clearly reacting to their interference, and it wasn't about to let them go unchallenged. "Fall back," she shouted, helping one of her injured soldiers to his feet. "Move, move, move." In the command center, Marcus stared at the screen in disbelief. The ship's adapting again. It's countering the distortion. "I don't know how much more we can do." Sarah's jaw tightened. "We're not giving up. There has to be another way." Jack Lewis, still parked a safe distance away, watched the chaos unfold through the lens of his camera. His heart pounded as he realized the significance of what he was witnessing. In a sudden burst of inspiration, he grabbed the radio transmitter he'd been using to monitor frequencies. If the aliens were using a neural link, maybe he could disrupt it on a smaller scale. "Here goes nothing," Jack muttered, tuning the transmitter to the alien signal's frequency. He cranked up the output and hit the broadcast button. The effect was immediate. The aliens nearest to his position faltered, their movements becoming sluggish and erratic. In the command center, Marcus's console lit up with new data. "Captain, I'm picking up another signal distortion. It's localized, but it's having an impact." Sarah frowned. "Where is it coming from?" Marcus traced the source and hesitated. It's coming from outside the perimeter." "A civilian transmitter." Sarah's eyes widened. Patch me through. Jack nearly dropped his radio when Sarah's voice crackled through. This is Captain Hayes of the U.S. Armed Forces. Identify yourself. Hi, Jack stammered. Name's Jack. Jack Lewis. I think I'm helping. You're disrupting their neural link, Sarah said, her tone urgent. Keep it up. We'll coordinate with you to amplify your signal. Jack nodded, his confidence growing. Got it. Let's fry some alien brains. Working together, Jack and Marcus fine-tuned the transmission, creating a feedback loop that sent the aliens into disarray. The ship's lights dimmed, and its energy field collapsed. On the ground, the remaining aliens collapsed, their bodies going limp as the neural link was severed. A tense silence settled over the battlefield. Elena and her team regrouped, their expressions a mix of relief and disbelief. The alien ship, now inert, hovered motionless above the desert, its threat seemingly neutralized. We did it, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with a shaky laugh. I can't believe it, but we did it. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Good work, everyone. Let's secure the site and figure out what's next. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the desert, Jack sat back in his truck, his camera still rolling. He had come looking for proof, and he'd found something far greater. For the first time in his life, he felt like he'd truly made a difference.